It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm so impressed with how organized you are and how prepared. I love it. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. So hello to anyone who is viewing live, welcome. And please drop in the comments where you are viewing from so we know where you're viewing from and I can see and engage with you. So today I am excited to have Erin Erenberg with us, and we're going to be talking about trademarking prior to launch. And this should be a fun conversation because Erin was a former IP attorney. So I'm very much looking forward to us talking about her journey as a IP attorney and then transitioning into entrepreneurship as a serial entrepreneur. So welcome to the show, Erin. And please take a second to introduce yourself, share more about yourself, what you do, and who you serve.
Sure. Thank you. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about trademarks. I actually, a former attorney who's come back into practice again recently. I kept up my license, and while I was only at a big firm for about a year, I have kept up with practicing law. I was an executive director of a nonprofit, and then I worked in tech and entertainment for a long time, over a decade, maybe 2 decades, aging myself. And I found that my license kind of followed me like the Pied Piper. You know, I was always looking for contracts and providing advice. And now that I run my own organization and community and business for modern mothers, I've done all of my own legal work. And as you said, established my own trademark and understand the importance of that. So I really love the regime of intellectual property and trademark in particular, and how it helps us think about our business and our rights, and have recently started helping startups, particularly female founders, understand their rights and protect them.
Nice. So you now currently do an integration of legal and then just like business. Like that's what you're doing currently?
Yes. So I launched Totum Women in 2018, and we help modern mothers be whole. And while we started focused on some products and community for modern mothers, really during the pandemic, I shifted that into holding a conversational space where I would bring in experts from my network to help women, because I was seeing that, you know, during isolation, a lot of things that had been problems for a long time actually came forward. Just some biases in the workplace and things that are holding women, in particular mothers, back from living the full extent of their ambitions. And so I decided to really lean into my legal training and my experience in the corporate world harder to really not only keep our community at Totum thriving, to continue to help modern mothers, but to really leverage our talk series, which is a monthly webinar series that we hold once a month on topics that rotate between mind, body, ambition, and relationships, but to also then go into the workplace and help workplaces create cultures that have care and empathy and really help caregivers of all kinds be successful and thrive at work. And so as part of doing that, I became reconnected with just some young businesses and founders, and certainly a lot of women who are part of the Totum community. We have 14,000 women just on Instagram alone. And then we have an email community and community on some other platforms. A lot of women were just needing help. Like, oh, hey, I am pivoting my business because of the pandemic, or I'm going out on my own because my employer wasn't really treating me well as a mother. And I have to, I'm parenting at home and I'm working at home and I have no boundaries. And the best way for me to create those is to launch something of my own. I found this ability for me to come in and help people, and without over lawyering and sort of turning on the clock and charging them a lot, I was able to come in, use my background and my legal brain to help them solve some problems and really get on their feet. And that, I really love how it's all working together now.
So at what point did you decide for yourself that you were done with the traditional, legal career?
Yeah.
And making the switch into having your own business?
Well, I lasted, in all honesty, at a big firm about 8 months, Radiance.
Oh,
I
wow. I don't blame you, though.
I had it in my mind, even though I'd worked, you know how it goes. Like I had been a summer associate at a couple big firms. I worked for a federal judge. Like I had some experience,
Right.
but I think I thought if I was making really solid money, it would all work out, right? But what really the fire in me, which is the same thing that motivates me today, is that I wanted to help people. I wanted to take the knowledge and skill that I got from law school. And, I remember learning in our ethics course that a profession is really defined as a common calling into service. And that for me remains this common calling. So an idea of working together with other people that have the same kind of background and being in service of others, that appealed to me. But what I found at a big firm was that we had a lot of these huge multinational businesses, and I wasn't really working with people at all. Like the projects that I got the most fulfillment on were small businesses that were saying things like, we feel like we invented this thing, and we feel like we have trademark copyright and patent rights, and can you help us? I love to just sit in a room and help educate them on what their rights were, help them figure out the boundaries of their rights, and then go do the work to execute and respect those rights. And I found that at a big firm, that wasn't really what the career was. And so I typed up a letter of resignation, I bounced, and I found myself taking on clients in the music space. And I ended up working with one client, SESAC, which you might know, they're a performing rights organization. I was working with them like 50 hours a week, but I was working as a consultant. So I got this taste for how I could have autonomy in my practice. I could really be developing a more involved relationship with the client and understanding their needs, but also having kind of these guardrails that allowed me some autonomy. So I was working with SESAC and taking on some music clients. And then that led to me being the first executive director of a nonprofit in the music space. And that's where my career really pivoted from more traditional practice in terms of the legal work I was doing to a blend of things that happened to include some transactional contracts practice. So that stayed with me. And then here and there, I would assist, just friends who were like, do I need a trademark? Can you help me file? Can you help me get there? But really from about 2010, my practice I stopped really quote unquote practicing, and I was more just in-house review of contracts. And if we were going to get into some kind of partnership deal, I was always the eyeballs and the strategy on that. And it wasn't really until like this year, I'm now going to, I'm taking the CLE again and have insurance and will be again engaging in practice more traditionally. So I made that shift kind of out in 2010, but again, was still working on contracts and helping people with trademarks on the side. And I established my own business in 2018. And the first thing that I did was file for federal registration of my mark.
Yes, and we're going to definitely talk about that. But I can relate to your trajectory because I too started in big law, and you're helping those multinational corporations. And you realize that that's not as fulfilling as helping the smaller businesses. I know for me, what I love is like seeing these newer businesses at the beginning when it's just like just getting started, just an idea, and then seeing them live out their dreams, like seeing that idea be manifested in such a huge way. And like that, I love it so much. And so, yeah, I get it in terms of like that fulfillment. You feel more fulfilled helping, I guess you could say, the little guy beginning of their journey, and then seeing what that turns into. So yeah, so tell me about that. So you filed your trademark. Was it before or shortly after launching for Totum?
Yeah, I did an intent to use. So it was before fully launching. I had launched the site and I had some specimens that, one of the things that we developed, I've sold them all off now, but I sold a lactation cookie. And so I put the mark on the lactation cookies and put our website up. And then I filed an intent to use, but then as soon as I had those specimens, I sent them in. The other thing that I was reflecting on your questions that you sent about this conversation, and I was thinking about, why did I decide, like, why was it important to, number one, register for a mark, have a mark? And I think even before that, my knowledge of trademarks and what that really means as it relates to a brand helped me choose a brand name that I'm still so proud of.
Yeah.
And it made me really have smart boundaries around the way in which I engage with businesses. So for example, and we can unpack that a little bit, but for example, one of the things that has happened to me, and I bet you've seen this with a lot of the founders you assist, is kind of quasi competitors have come to me and said, let's be co-founders. And when they say that, they will often want me to just like jump into their brand and extinguish everything I created and be a part of them. And because I took the time to think about, like, what's a strong mark? Does the mark, have anything to do with the services I'm providing? And what's that relationship in terms of strength of mark? And then actually having and keeping up with my federal registration, I feel like, heck no, I'm not going to just put this all to the side and jump in with you. I have goodwill. I have something that I've protected. And so it's made me be able to say in those relationships, you know what, this could look like? This could look like a consultancy, or I can work with you in an advisory capacity, or we can collaborate. But what I won't do is just jump in with you and put all this work by the way. And I don't think I would have had those strong boundaries, because it's intimidating being a solopreneur. Yeah. I don't know that I would have had those boundaries had I not established the mark the way that I did.
Yeah, and that's an important point. And I guess I'm going to address 2 points for those who don't know what an intent to use trademark application is. So as before you even launch your business, you can file an intent to use trademark application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which allows you to stake your claim in the name that you're planning to use. And you can do this 2 to 3 years before you officially start using a name. And so a lot of us in the trademark space, and I know a lot of my clients, they take advantage of the intent to use. They want to make sure that they have confidence and the peace of mind of having that name on lock while they're getting their business affairs in order. And so that's what Erin was talking about. She filed an intent to use application before officially launching her business. And that is something that's available to anyone. So I did want to clarify that. And then the second point about, it's so important about the name that you choose, right? Like you want to choose a unique name that allows you to stand out from all the competitors and everyone you're doing, a name that doesn't describe what you are actually offering. And because you want to be able to build that brand in the marketplace that is distinctive and recognizable. And I totally get what you mean about feeling like, I don't want to collaborate with you if I'm going to lose my identity, my unique brand that I've worked so hard to build. I totally relate to that, especially like when you're exploring partnerships, whether it's like collaborating with other law firms or what have you. It's like, no, I got to keep this Radiance IP law. So I get it. I totally get it. So tell me, so how many years have you been in business so far? You said Totum since 2018, correct?
2018, yes. And it's funny because I filed my intent to use in 2017, and then we launched in 2018. Yeah. Okay,
cool. So if there's anything you wish you knew at the beginning, in other words, what's the best business advice you have for anyone who is jumping into entrepreneurship or has been in entrepreneurship for a while?
Yeah, wow. I would say the number one thing to really think about is what makes you unique. What about your skill set, your experience, your superpowers? You know, we've all been gifted in very specific ways. Nobody else is Radiance. Nobody else is me. And you'll find your purpose and you'll find sustainability if you identify that first. And so I really learned that the hard way. And in a way, I had identified it. So I'll tell you a little bit about, my story. when I became a mom in 2012, that's when I had our first child. I was really shocked that there had been so much attention paid to me while I was pregnant. And there was even a lot of kind of cultural conversation about how you give birth. Like, how supported will you be in birth? Who's going to be your doctor? Do you want to have an epidural? And then there's thankfully a lot of attention on the baby. You have to set up a pediatrician and have these appointments. But as a woman who has transitioned into motherhood, especially then, I mean, there was very little even conversation about that. I don't even want to say support, like forget support. There wasn't even a conversation about what your body goes through, what your mind goes through, what your ambition goes through, and what your career is going to look like, what your relationships go through, whether it's with a partner or your friends and family. And I was really shocked by that. And I thought, again, I'm very driven by service. I thought, I do not want other women to experience being so confused and then so ashamed because they felt like it was their fault that they didn't know all these changes were going to happen and how to help themselves. So I really want one day to establish a platform that helps them. And I didn't know if it was going to be a digital community, a book, a suite of product. I wasn't sure. I just knew there was this fire in me that I wanted to be a part of helping in that way. But then what happened was I created a product. So unintentionally in a way, when I went back to work, I was working at a tech firm at the time, and I was like the second or third employee with the founders. And then we went through a Series A, a Series B, and we were growing. So all through my maternity leave, our CEO was calling me and bouncing ideas off of me. And so I was starting to get stressed, and I was losing that feeling of respite and being able to bond with my baby and breastfeed and have that all kind of come more naturally. I was going into more kind of, that masculine energy of like having to have a container around work. Mm-hmm. And when I went back to work, my ability to breastfeed completely fell off a cliff. Like I went from feeling really lucky that everything was working to it wasn't working at all. I wasn't able to pump not even a bottle. I wasn't able to pump like an ounce out. Yeah. And I researched it, and I was also starving, and I had a sweet tooth. So I started making these cookies. They were really loaded with a lot of nutrient dense ingredients like nut butters and nuts and super dark chocolate and oats and whole wheat flour, a lot of things that filled me up and were good for me, but also helped me boost breast milk production. Yeah. So I was making those. They worked for me. And so then, my coworkers started wanting them, my friends, my family, my neighbors, all of it. And so many people were saying to me, my goodness, this is a business. You've got to start a cookie business. And because I had always wanted to work entirely on my own, I mean, even my legal practice became an entrepreneurial practice from the jump pretty much. And I ran a nonprofit, and then I helped tech firms build their business. I had always been entrepreneurial, but I'd never done something fully on my own, like without a net on my own. Because of that, it was really appealing to me that I had got all this input that I should start a business. But what always felt wrong was for it to be a CPG business. I don't know about consumer packaged goods. That is not my background. We just heard my background. Nothing in there says like, I worked for Coca-Cola. I didn't know about that space. And so but it was the first thing that I had created to solve a problem that was mine, that was then redundant within the group, like the target market that I wanted to serve, right? And so while I did work with an executive coach and I nailed down the idea that my mission was to help modern mothers be whole, and that our first product would be this cookie because I had created it, I think if I had sat in that a step further and found encouragement around really looking at how I wanted to spend my time, what my relationships were, what my network was, what my zone of genius was, I think I would have more quickly found my way into what I'm doing now versus learning the hard way about CPG. So one of the things that was always important to me, again, is going back to that word autonomy. That's one of my top 5 core values is autonomy. And so therefore, I did not want investors. I had been, I mentioned these tech companies where I was. I had been at these like early stage tech companies who were very, very mission centered. Then they brought in money, and they might have gotten all the, the shine and TechCrunch and Entrepreneur and Inc. But I knew what was going on behind the scenes, which was there was so much pressure to have this, what they called hockey stick growth month over month, like that they lost their mission. And I thought, I don't want that. That's not for me. But what I learned the hard way was for CPG, most companies that are in the food and consumer packaged goods space, it's all about growth. It's not about margin because the margins are so hard to come by. So a lot of these companies, pretty much all of them, bring on an investor so that they can afford to buy a suite of products. They can afford to just grow and not look at their margins because the final strategy is usually exit. They're looking to get bought by a big company. And so not really examining that as thoroughly as I might have at the beginning, I spent a lot of money and stress and time really working on the cookie bit of it all. Whereas if I wasn't going to get investors, that wasn't really that's not the smartest place to be, right? Because that wasn't my zone of genius, so to speak.
So what I gathered is that you wish, I guess you lost track of what your why was a little bit along the journey. And then once you were able to reconnect with your why are you doing this, who you want to serve, then it all came back to you, I guess you could say. And I can relate to that as an entrepreneur because that's the thing. A lot of times you get distracted by the dangling carrot or the golden, you see what everyone else is doing and, ooh, that looks cool. But then you're like, no, that's not why I got into this. Like, you know, so it's like you have to get yourself back on track.
Yeah.
As to why you got into it.
Yeah. And for me, it was tricky because the cookies were still very much connected to my why. They were very much solving a problem for modern mothers. I mean, part of being a modern mother is being told that you need to work like you don't have kids and be a mother like you don't work. And so the cookies really did. They fed mothers, they helped them produce their breast milk. I got such great feedback around them and they were really serving. But even though they were in my why, I wasn't really in my zone of genius. And if I had wanted to build out a consumer packaged goods company, I should have considered bringing on a co-founder who knew that space or getting investment dollars so that I could really afford just to, grow without worrying about the margin. But it is true. It's all connected to my why because underneath that is kind of the personal why. When you think about why did you go into business? So there's like, why do I serve? Who do I want to serve? But then you also have to stay aligned with your own values. And if one of those is autonomy and really using your in service to me is using your gifts to help others, that's where it was a little broken for me. I wasn't really in my gifts. I'm not a baker. I'm not somebody that's working.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So how did you identify what your zone of genius was? Did you take I know there's like strength finders tests that people do to identify like their top 5 strengths, but what did you do to really discover what your zone of genius was?
Yeah, so I did a lot of things and I have done those. The most recent one I did was the Clifton strengths. I don't know. No, yeah, I like that one a lot. I think there's a lot to be gained from those, but really I started listening. If I'm going to be honest with you, I started to be more vulnerable. I think for a while I was really kind of stubborn. I just wanted the cookies to work and I wanted this kind of preconceived notion about how this business was going to run. I wanted it to work and I was kind of stubborn about it. But I had input, like my husband would be saying, well, you have this legal background, you've worked at all these companies and you know all these great people. You could be standing in that. A lot of other women could stand in what you're standing, but you have something unique to offer. And at first, I'm being very honest here, as like a feminist and like kind of stubborn, I was like, don't tell me how to run my thing, And I think the other thing that happened too was during the pandemic, we all had to get really serious about how we spend our time. And I have 3 little kids, one of whom has a medical complexity. He was diagnosed with a chronic illness during the pandemic, not related to the pandemic. And it really made me have to take a hard look at our greatest commodity, which is time, and say, what experiences and, background and privilege and talent and education do I have that I can leverage for good and be in service of that commodity I have, which is my time. How do I use that most valuably? And so it took getting really clear again, like, I have a process of writing out my top 5 values and defining them myself. And that's something I learned from an executive coach, like when I was starting Totum, but that shifts all the time. And I went in and rewrote my values, and I did do the Clifton strengths. But I think it was also really clear to me just in terms of the type of business that I was in.
Yeah.
I also went deep, went inside. I had to kind of like reckon with myself and say, you know what? These cookies served me. They served a lot of women, and I'm really proud of them. And they've had their moment. And now I need to pass the torch. I need to sell them off to somebody who can be the steward of them and wants to put their time into it, because that's not where I am right now.
I totally get it. So what is next for Totum Women? What's next for you?
Yeah. So right now, we still have our community at Totum Women, and we are focusing on our webinar series called Totum Talks and our membership, which is called Inner Circle. And what that provides is a whole year of support from experts. And so while we've been in the pandemic, that's been online. It's been monthly webinar events for everything from how to divide up household labor at home with expert authors who talk on that subject, to how to be an activist with women who are in that space, to how to hold your body and support your body with people who are well-versed in pelvic floor. So it really rotates between mind, body, ambition, relationships, supporting modern mothers that way. So we will continue with the Totum Talk series. The Inner Circle is a level deeper, where we have more intimate gatherings once a month. For women in our inner circle. We had a book club with the author, an amazing author, join us in that inner circle. But then also I am leveraging all of that for corporate. So going into the workplace and helping a handful of companies who really want to do better by their caregivers and working parents, helping them really take a look at what are their policies and practices, and are they serving their working parents? Is there some executive or leadership coaching that they need to have in order to create a culture that cares more about the load that working parents are holding? And also helping female founders with their startup legal work, whether that be, putting together a wholesale agreement when you've got your first one and you have to protect yourself, or thinking about what your mark should be and how to protect it. So it's really working parent advocacy and startup IP. Awesome.
So how can our viewers connect with you?
So we are at Totum Women, and it's TOTUM Women. The reason for that is Totum means whole in Latin. And so back to picking that brand name, that's why we did that. So at Totum Women on Instagram, I check those DMs. I have somebody who helps me with social media, but I check the DMs, and you can reach us there about our workplace consultancy, one-on-ones. You can find out more about Totum Talks. And for your listeners, you can contact me at Erin@totumwomen.com, and we can work out special rates for one-on-one consultancy.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me this afternoon, Erin. It's a pleasure chatting with you.
Pleasure to be with you. I would love to hear more about your journey someday, Radiant.
I look forward to it.
Me too.
Thank you all for viewing today's show. If you are watching the replay, be sure to drop #replay in the comments. Otherwise, I look forward to chatting with you next week. Thanks again, Erin.
My pleasure.
Take care, guys.
Take
Bye.
care.